如来大成经20诸天，加上刀剑14片的剑招，你们当真是要绝了朕的生路？下一招便可结束他的性命。
During the fiercest stage of the battle between Emperor Yanfeng, the Tao ancestor, and the Rulai, the heavens and earth trembled beneath dazzling sword radiance, boundless Buddhist dharma, and the protection of 9 true dragons. The Tao ancestor unleashed the most powerful half-strike of his sword art, while the Rulai wielded his golden alms bowl to summon the 20 heavens, determined to force the emperor into a dead end. Just as the battle reached the brink of life and death, the sudden arrival of Elder Ma and crippled Grandpa brought the entire battlefield to a standstill. Yet the two elders paid no attention to the struggle for the empire. Instead, they were searching for a single woman, the wife of the former sect master of the Heavenly Saint Sect, who carried within her heart an extraordinarily dangerous devil. In their view, allowing her to escape would bring consequences even more disastrous than the emperor's death, enough to plunge the entire world into chaos. After confirming that no one knew the woman's whereabouts, the two elders immediately departed, leaving the great battle behind. The battlefield instantly erupted once more. The Rulai continued pressing down with his golden alms bowl, forcing the 20 heavens upon his opponent, while the Tao ancestor unleashed the 14th half-strike of the Tao sword, a supreme technique that evolved the very principles of heaven and earth and came close to nullifying every divine art. Facing the overwhelming pressure exerted by both supreme experts, Emperor Yanfeng circulated the 9 Dragons Emperor technique. 9 true dragons coiled around him as he desperately withstood the crushing force of the 20 worlds and the supreme Sword Tao. Although his movements were heavily restrained, the power of his divine arts continued to rise without end. Realizing that the national preceptor of the Yankang nation had yet to appear, the Rulai decided to bring the battle to a swift conclusion. He struck out with another palm, summoning 5 divine mountains from the heavens to descend upon the battlefield, driving the confrontation to its ultimate climax.
两位爷爷，大事不好！
皇帝死了，换一人便是。
你们也不希望我天天被人追杀吧？尸体！
道主和如来一起出手，肯定是死的。
While fleeing dragon Qilin was nearly exhausted from carrying Qin Mu on his back, but after being threatened that the Azure Ox would leave him far behind, he had no choice but to push himself to his absolute limit and accelerate. At that very moment, Elder Ma and crippled Grandpa suddenly appeared. Upon learning that the Rulai and the Tao ancestor had joined forces to assassinate Emperor Yanfeng, Qin Mu desperately begged the two elders to rescue the emperor. However, they believed that confronting the two supreme experts head-on would be tantamount to suicide. At best, they could only try to snatch the emperor's corpse and carry it away. On the battlefield, Emperor Yanfeng stood alone against the two supreme experts. Although his ki and blood remained astonishingly vigorous, he suffered one grievous wound after another, and his divine treasures gradually began to collapse. Both the Rulai and the Tao ancestor were convinced that a single additional strike would be enough to finish the emperor once and for all. At the decisive moment, crippled Grandpa suddenly intervened with his bamboo staff, blocking the killing blows of both opponents. In that fleeting instant, Elder Ma seized the opportunity to spirit Emperor Yanfeng away from the battlefield. Seeing that their target had been rescued, yet realizing that his injuries were already beyond salvation, the Rulai and the Tao ancestor chose not to pursue. They believed that even if the emperor survived, he would be nothing more than a cripple. Not long afterward, Emperor Yanfeng was brought before Qin Mu in a dying state. His entire body was drenched in blood. His chi and blood were nearly exhausted, and his divine treasures continued collapsing one after another. He could only hold on for a short while longer. Without the slightest hesitation, Qin Mu immediately used the creation innate art to seal the emperor's soul and preserve his life, then applied dragon saliva to his wounds in an attempt to prolong his remaining vitality. While Qin Mu devoted himself completely to saving the emperor, Elder Ma and crippled Grandpa did not stop for even a moment. Instead, they continued racing forward, deliberately drawing away the pursuing enemies to buy Qin Mu the precious time he needed to save the emperor standing on the very boundary between life and death.
你打算扒他的皮，自己做皇帝吗？
Without a second thought, Qin Mu immediately called out, and Fatty Dragon head back to Granny Sai's place. Dragon Qilin immediately turned around. Along the way, Qin Mu fed Emperor Yanfeng some dragon saliva, then used a massage technique to force the stagnant blood out of his body. As he treated the emperor, he continuously considered how to save him. A moment later, he took out several spirit pills. Back when he had comprehended the great unity art, his own qi and blood had been severely depleted, leaving both his body and mind utterly exhausted. At that time, he had refined 2 life-saving spirit pills. One was the Spirit Buddha pill used to nourish the mind. The other was the Blood Glory pill, which specialized in replenishing qi and blood. In the end, he had only fully recovered after taking the Great Vitality pill and consuming an entire Crimson Dragon Carp King. The pill in his hand now was the Blood Glory pill. Sayama hesitated. At present, Emperor Yanfeng's qi and blood had been almost completely exhausted, but his life could still be saved. If he administered the Blood Glory pill, the Emperor's qi and blood would surge instantly. However, his divine treasures, already on the verge of collapse, would be unable to withstand such an overwhelming influx of power and would shatter immediately. Emperor Yanfeng's cultivation was simply too profound. Once the power within his divine treasures ran out of control, with nowhere to escape, his entire body would explode. When that happened, not only would Emperor Yanfeng perish, but Qin Mu and Dragon Qilin would also be blown to pieces. But if he failed to replenish the Emperor's qi and blood, there would be no chance of saving him. I have to release the power trapped inside his divine treasures before restoring his qi and blood. Chima pondered silently. The best solution would be to use silver needles to guide the violent energy out. But considering Emperor Yanfeng's cultivation, the silver needles would likely melt the instant they pierced his divine treasures, making it impossible to channel the energy away. The second option was to seal that power. Unfortunately, Qin Mu's cultivation was nowhere near sufficient to seal Emperor Yanfeng's immense cultivation. There was one final method: using a dispersal spirit pill to forcibly dissipate all of the Emperor's cultivation. However, such pills were refined entirely from deadly poisons. The slightest mistake would dissolve not only the Emperor's cultivation, but his physical body as well. In the end, Qin Mu chose the second option. He himself lacked the strength to create the seal, but Granny Sai could. Even if I save him, he'll probably become nothing more than a cripple. Qin Mu sighed inwardly. Emperor Yanfeng was still in the prime of his life. Had this calamity never befallen him, he could easily have lived another 2 or 3 centuries. But after today's battle, even if he survived, his remaining lifespan would be no greater than that of an ordinary mortal, a supreme ruler who had dominated the world. Reduced to an ordinary man in the blink of an eye, Qin Mu could hardly imagine how despairing the Emperor would be upon awakening. Perhaps sealing his divine treasures is the best choice. He gently shook his head. Maybe someday there will still be a chance to restore them. Yet even he knew that such hope was incredibly slim. Dragon Qilin swiftly carried him back to Granny C's wooden cottage deep within the forest. Using his true essence, Qin Mu supported Emperor Yanfeng's body, preventing it from being jolted during the journey. Hearing the commotion, Granny Sai stepped outside. The moment she saw Emperor Yanfeng, her eyes widened. "Mu-er, what kind of trouble have you gotten yourself into this time?" When she recognized the person lying on Dragon Qilin's back, she was even more astonished. The Emperor. Then her face blossomed into a radiant smile. "Brat, are you planning to skin the Emperor and take his place on the throne yourself? Excellent. You're becoming more and more promising." But the next moment, her expression turned serious. "Though the 3,000 beauties in the imperial harem are all little vixens, be careful not to let them charm you out of your wits." Qin Mu did not know whether to laugh or cry. "I'm not planning to skin him. Granny helped me seal the power inside the Emperor's divine treasures first. Don't let him explode. I'm going to buy some medicinal herbs. And please, don't casually refine the Emperor while I'm gone." Granny Sai nodded, but still could not resist reminding him. "Be back before nightfall. Otherwise, that little vixen Lie Tianqing will definitely be delighted to skin him and disguise himself as the Emperor." At that moment, Emperor Yanfeng had just regained consciousness. Having heard their entire conversation, he could not help shivering. Zhongzhen Grandmaster's granny. Just what kind of person is she? How can she be this terrifying? Then another thought suddenly struck him. Wait, wasn't Lai Tianxing already dead? Why is he here? The thought had only just crossed his mind. His injuries were simply too severe. Darkness engulfed his vision. Emperor Yanfeng lost consciousness once again.